All right, I'm calling to order the special board meeting of Friday, August 5th at 12:54 p.m. I would first like to apologize to all of our many attendees. Our closed session took longer than we had scheduled. We are going to begin with a roll call. Ms. Shen.
Student trustee Corzo Clark.
Here.
Student trustee Mala.
Here.
Trustee Boyd.
Here.
Trustee Davidson.
Here.
Trustee Duran.
Here.
Vice President Doss.
Here.
President Hinckley.
Here. And can we have the reading of the mission and vision statement by our students?
Yes. The mission of Albany Unified School District is to provide excellent public education that empowers all to achieve their fullest potential as productive citizens. AUSD is committed to creating comprehensive learning opportunities in a safe, supportive, and collaborative environment, addressing the individual needs of each student.
Our meeting norms are to maintain a focus on what is best for our students, to ensure a safe environment for all views to be expressed, treating each other, staff, and the public respectfully, to endeavor to find common solutions to issues through collaboration without sacrificing one's belief in what is best for students, and to make a commitment to effective deliberation, each one listening with an open mind while others are allowed to express their points of view, even if one disagrees.
Great, thank you. There was no action taken in closed session. And now I need a motion to approve the agenda for our meeting.
I motion that we approve the agenda for this meeting.
I second.
Student trustee Corzo Clark.
Yes.
Student trustee Mala.
Yes.
Trustee Davidson.
Yes.
Trustee Duran.
Yes.
Vice President Doss.
Yes.
President Hinckley.
Yes,
Trustee Boyd.
Yes.
Thank you.
our agenda is approved unanimously. So we will move to our first and only review and action item, Memorandum of Understanding between the Albany Teachers Association and Albany Unified School District for hybrid instruction. And now I'll hand this to Dr. Wells.
Thank you. We been at this negotiation for quite some time. We started back in the fall, and this negotiations, the backdrop of it has gone through so many different phases and climate changes. We went from being in a crisis with COVID to COVID surges to making sure we include all the health and safety components to make sure our kids and our staff are safe during this pandemic. The good news of where we are now, we have vaccines where many of our staff have the opportunity to be vaccinated and are excited about coming back to have in-person time. And so although this proposal that we're presenting to you is the hard work of our teachers and our staff and district office and our principals and our administrators throughout, we see this as a good initial step as we begin to make good progress towards reopening and having in-person instruction. And as we transition, being optimistic to one day in the immediate future, transitioning into full return of in-person instruction. And so at this time, I'm going to hand this over to our Chief Human Resource Officer, Marina Gonzalez, to speak a little further about this MOU and then hand it back off to our President Hinckley. Or we can just leave it there and I'll hand it back off to Madam Chair, President Hinckley, for questions the board may have about the MOU.
Great, thank you. First, I want to say I think I'm speak for a lot of people and being very excited about being able to take a step to move us forward. But I know there were a lot of questions from board members, so I'm going to start by asking folks to put those on the table so we can talk about them. Trustee Boyd.
Thank you, President Hinckley. One question that I would like us to discuss and to have guidance on is how the required quarantine after symptoms show up in a classroom, how that will be enforced, what the level of discretion is there on the part of the superintendent to enforce the closing of a classroom. Also the difference between symptoms if they're showing up in class versus if they're reported from at-home time. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Boyd. Appreciate the question. That was an item where in context and in the way it reads, and if you read throughout, it feels like there's some contradictory language throughout. But for that specific phrase where it says quarantine or closing a classroom, for example, if a kid has a cough, that's a symptom, but the contract says symptoms. And we have a list of symptoms that we would consider before making such a big move. And anything related to COVID and health and safety, we have a protocol here in the county where we consult with our chief health official. Right now is Dr. Nicholas Moss before doing that. So it's somewhat a process, but not an immediate shutdown because a kid exhibit a symptom or two. There's a process one must go through before shutting down and quarantining.
Thank you. Could you also clarify just the other side of that, which is the decision about when to reopen the classroom? Because the language right now says that we would have to wait for a negative test and a 14-day quarantine. Is that reopening also something that you would be consulting with the public health director about reopening a classroom if it had been closed down because of symptoms?
Oh, absolutely. We don't do this independently. We're educators, but we're not experts. And so we have a process here in Albany that we are consulting with our chief health official on all COVID related matters.
Thank you. Trustee Davidson.
I wanted to ask about the 6-foot distancing and how stringently we're going to hold to that, and whether we might be readdressing that based on county guidelines, and how we're looking at that distancing and how it plays out in our classrooms.
The 6 feet distancing is the original county language, and we think it's not an issue because our classes are large enough to meet this criteria. And so we don't think that is an issue for us.
When you say large enough to meet this criteria, does that mean our classes can hold a normal amount of students with 6 feet? For example, a 24 student class, or you mean to meet the 16 student criteria that we have?
The current 16 students or 16 people criteria. It could be 14 kids and a teacher and an aide.
Thank you. Trustee Duran. You're muted.
Muted.
Okay, thank you. Superintendent, I have 2 questions basically. One is, if we approve the MOU today, would we be able to start tomorrow or maybe Tuesday evening on a different schedule than the hybrid schedule, which is shown as part of the MOU, the attachment, so to speak, because that is obviously a great concern to the community. So are we able to change the hybrid, perhaps the hours of the classes, and thereby extending school day for students? And is there any turnaround time involved with that? And then the second question is, could you clarify between the MOU and a fall contract?
Thank you for the question. Your first question had a number of different questions in it. Can we extend the day? No, we can't extend the day. We do have working day, but I think what you meant is, can we extend in-person time? I think that's where you were now. Okay, thank you for that clarification, because that's what the community wants. The community is have multiple perspectives. There are many in the community who want immediately more in-person time, and there's many in the community who want to remain remote. But to your, I think, intent of the question is that if we approve the MOU, does that end our discussion and we stay that course for the remaining 10 weeks of school? No, I think we can continue with the with discussions with our labor union here, ATA, about more in-person time, given the fact that it might be a different climate where when we started the negotiations, as I mentioned before, it was around where COVID was in a surge. It was really, really bad, and there was no vaccine or light at the end of the tunnel. Now, since the light is getting brighter and brighter by the week, where we have about 80%, I think it is, or so of our teachers who wanted to be vaccinated, and maybe fully vaccinated before the start of school, many, it does warrant ongoing conversation and maybe some updates to in-person schooling. I think we now have adopted a term called zoomed out. I think our teachers are zoomed out, our kids are zoomed out, and our parents are just Zoom tired. And so we would continue with discussions and mainly around increasing the time, in-person time, because as we look at it, for example, our elementary schools, their in-person time within a week maximum is about 3 hours. And so the question comes, is 3 hours sufficient? But I think it's a good initial start. So the short answer to your question, I think, can we start having the conversation about increasing minutes? That short answer would be yes.
Actually, Superintendent, if you could just expand on that in the sense of, I'm really asking, once we have an idea of what extended hybrid would look like, how long would that take to actually roll out in terms of kids showing up in the classroom for a more extended amount of time?
And you know, that is not, in my opinion, a black and white answer. It depends. It really does. It depends on how soon we can get back to the table, how often we can bargain. For example, if it's a sense of urgency and we were bargaining every day, of course, the timeline and my response to how quickly we can do that would be very different if we only bargain weekly. And so it depends on how often we bargain. Obviously, oh, go ahead, you're shaking your head. So
yeah, I'm sorry. My understanding was that from both you and our lawyer, that we do not have to negotiate.
Well, I don't want to get into the legal issues in closed session and closed session issues and open session and all that. But I do want to stay within the open session areas that we can talk about. And that is, I say it depends. For example, if we were bargaining every day, I imagine we would be able to move quickly than a bargaining session once every 2 weeks or once a week.
Vice President Doss.
Yeah, I'm a little confused about the conversation that was previously had between the trustee and superintendent. So maybe we can kind of go over that a little bit, because I was was a little confused. I'm not really sure what the conclusion or what the answer to our question was. And then for me, my only question is for a time frame to be placed on. So for example, for negotiations to happen every day for the next 2 weeks, and then for a plan to be submitted to the board. Are we able to do that specifically? And like to have that time frame in place, have like those, like have, you know, more concrete dates in mind versus, you know, we're just going to continue the conversation, because the previous negotiations that have concluded and that we're voting on today took a long time. And so if we are continuing the conversation, or if we're saying as a board, you know, to go and continue the conversation, and they take as long as the previous conversation, then it's longer than the amount of time the kids have left in school. So how do we go about setting a specific time and then bringing that back to the board within that time? So that's my question. And then,
let me attempt to answer the question.
yeah, but before you do, and then to follow up on Trustee Duran's question, since it sounds as if that might be some information that we can't talk about publicly, I'd like a commitment that that question would be answered and sent out to all of the board members.
I think your question is very similar. It's around, can we negotiate more often, for example, daily opposed to weekly or every other week? Is that the question?
Yeah, that's part of it. Absolutely.
Okay, so part of that question, on our staff, we can be available to negotiate daily. We can't direct the other side to do the same. We don't have that jurisdiction. And so it goes back to, it depends. So yes, we can make ourselves available daily, moving with a sense of urgency to address the board's will around having negotiation be shorter, quicker, and moving with a sense of urgency, more specifically around a big ticket item that I think is crystal clear, in-person minutes.
So maybe I can, I don't want to, we can ask more questions, but maybe I can summarize a little bit where I think we're at. So we have an MOU in front of us that sets out a lot of the safety criteria that we've agreed on for reopening. Some of those criteria are tied to county or state guidance, which very well might shift, right, in the next weeks if we continue to see case numbers drop, if we continue to see changes at the state level about guidance. And the district, and I think that the teachers are aware that that guidance may change as we go forward, and that we'll continue to have conversations about that. So there are items like the 16-person cohort limit, like some of the distancing language that we are bound by because of public guidance, but that guidance might change. And some of that language requires, puts limits on what we can do in terms of how many kids we can have in the school, for example. This agreement, as I understand it, does not limit us to a certain amount of in-person hours. It just limits us to this cohort size and the spacing. So we could direct the superintendent to bring us back, for example, a schedule that expands the number of hours without affecting any of those safety criteria. We can also direct the superintendent to bring us back some schedules that would require renegotiating some of these criteria. For example, the number of cohorts that a teacher would be exposed to over the course of a day. And so I think the board has the option to give direction to do any number of those things. which would start with asking staff, asking the superintendent to bring us redesigned in-person schedules. And we can do that at the end of this meeting after we've taken action on the agreement. And we can certainly provide, you know, a sense of the urgency with which we would like that to take place. Let me say that. But I do think we're at a point, as the superintendent said, where things are changing very quickly in the public health scene. Many of our teachers will have 2 doses of the vaccine within just a week or 2. And so we're excited to see that. And we hope that it means that we can continue to address some of the concerns about the schedules. So that, I don't know if that helps answer what we can do next, but those are our options at the end of this meeting. I will also just note that on Tuesday, we have a longer presentation about current public health criteria, the thought that went into the current hybrid schedules, so we can also have a longer discussion and provide much more detailed direction at that time. Trustee Davidson.
I just wanted to follow up on what you just stated. So my understanding as well is that this agreement, we have to keep whatever's offered within the agreed upon hours that our teachers will work. The one conflict that gets difficult within this current MOU is that we can't really expand our in-person hours within a teacher's day and keep our remote learning option consistent through the rest of this year, which was where we got into a stalemate before. So I think as a board, we really need to look at how we're going to address that moving forward for the last few weeks of this year, and also really keep our eye on the prize of a full reopening in the fall with a rethought remote learning option. I just want to be careful that while I want us to reopen and we're moving that direction for the hybrid, and I have been a big proponent of it, that we're not just now all of a sudden saying, okay, now we're going to throw remote learning out the window, which is something a lot of parents spoke for wanting to have stay consistent. And we're going to go all the way to taking hours away from that without just some careful balancing conversations, et cetera. So I know we're back in a difficult situation, and I'm willing to kind of approve what we have here, with the next step being that we are going to ask for a few options of plans for moving forward.
Thank you. Trustee Boyd.
Thank you, President Hinckley. I just wanted to respond to, I think, or sort of re-energize the second part of, I believe, Trustee Duran's question earlier, which was about the fall return to school and any relationship between the MOU and a fall return, and just say that it's my understanding that there's no relationship between this MOU and a fall return, so that nothing that is in this MOU has any bearing on what we would do when we return to school in the fall. And if that's not correct, I would hope that Superintendent Wells would correct me on that.
That is our, Trustee Boyd, that is our position and understanding.
And again, just for clarity about next steps. So on Tuesday, when we have our reopening discussion, one of the things that that I asked for was some clarity about what it means to talk about the fall, right? What are the constraints? Under normal circumstances, we don't bargain about the beginning of the school year, right? So trying to understand sort of what are the different scenarios. So we are going to get some information about that on Tuesday. Any other board questions? We will come back to the board after public comment for more discussion. But great.
Quick question,
So,
sorry.
yeah.
Since this is a special meeting, I'm just wondering what the plan is for how long we're going to allow for public comment.
Well, the meeting, we're already quite late, but I'd like to take all the public comment to get through all that. I'd like to do 1 minute. That gives us another 20 minutes. We just to be cognizant of the time we scheduled for the meeting. All right, I'm gonna.
Is that Trustee Dawson? I'm sorry to interrupt. I really want to hear from our public as well. I do feel also though, like we made a lot of room for a lot of public comment in our last meeting by taking an agenda item off. So I'm going to ask this as politely as possible. And I don't want our public to be upset. I'm sorry about that sound. That if you have sent us a lot of emails, we have definitely read them. And if you have let us know things before or shared it, we are definitely listening and we are definitely discussing. And I think our time is wisely used here, having our deliberations. So if you are, speaking, I know this is probably to even ask people not to speak, but just please be aware of the time that we're trying to put into this to move these things forward, and how much attention we are giving to what you've been sending us as well.
Yeah, and also just to confirm, so we are making reopening a standing item separate in every meeting, so there is also an opportunity there, but I will start trying to manage the Zoom. I apologize again, I always botch this a little bit, but we're going to start with Alex and Julie, if you have the timer.
Thank you, board trustees and Dr. Wells. I'm the parent of a Marin first and third grader. This hybrid plan is inadequate, but I support approving it as a first step toward returning to real school. I urge you to immediately pivot to expanding in-person school for this school year. And I urge you to consider a much more aggressive reopening schedule for the elementary schools where the logistical hurdles should be the easiest to overcome. If you have to bargain every day, do it. I also think it's a mistake to lock in requirements like the 6-foot requirement or the 16-person cohort in an MOU when those are either not required by the county or those guidelines may change. Albany and Piedmont, we've been consistently the best in terms of case rates in the county. We should be at the forefront of safely reopening. And I'm really worried that our public schools are just declining and we're watching it happen and doing nothing. And I hope we can do better. Thank you.
Thank you. Angela.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm a physician and mother of a Marin kindergartner. I appreciate all the comments and discussion that you've made so far. And so I just wanted to urge you to change the language around the quarantine and shutting down classrooms for any on or off-site student exhibiting COVID symptoms. Perhaps when you are able to renegotiate, you could just link it to the California Department of Public Health guidelines, which are very different to what's in this MOU. Again, I worry about the limiting to 6 feet, and so I would encourage you to review that when you negotiate a new MOU. And as we heard from Superintendent Wells about the urgency of negotiating a new MOU, please do this urgently more than once every 2 weeks to be able to expand on the in-person hours. Thank you.
Thank you. Shelley.
Hi, Superintendent Wells, board members and members of the staff and community. My name is Shelley Ruby and I'm the parent of a 3rd grader and 7th grader. I'm here today to urge you to fully reopen our schools. We signed up for the hybrid plan because our children are desperate to go back to school, but this hybrid plan is not a long-term solution. We're fortunate to have family in Albany who can help transport our kids to and from school while we are working full-time. But many other families are similarly desperate for their children to go back to in-person learning, but cannot due to their work schedules. Families should not have to choose between work and their children's education. Right now, the district is letting families down, and many are losing faith in our celebrated Albany schools. I grew up in Albany, and I know we take pride in being different. We are a small, close-knit community with outstanding teachers and public schools, but we are in danger of destroying what makes us so special. We see science is real on signs across our town. We must follow the science, listen to the medical professionals in our community, and stop letting our irrational fears paralyze us indefinitely and destroy our children's lives and futures. Thank you.
Thank you. Trupti.
Hi, my name is Trupti and I'm the parent of a kindergartner at Cornell School. While this MOU is the first baby step in reopening our schools and making our children's lives better, please approve it. And immediately we must expand and work towards expanding our poultry hybrid hours after approving this MOU. I'm sure you all must have read the article in the Washington Post where our tiny district has been used as an example of a terrible hybrid plan. We are literally the poster child of a crummy hybrid plan. We live in Albany because we love our schools, we love our teachers, we love our community. And thank you so much to the board members, to Superintendent Wells and everybody who's doing everything that they can to do to reopen this. But please, we don't want to become the national example of failing our kids. So it is our humble request as parents to please continue doing your efforts as you're doing right now. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Rachel.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
My name is Rachel Chapman. I am a woman of color, a solo parent, a former teacher, and a former public entity lawyer. I get that what you're doing is hard. I get everybody's sides in this, and I appreciate everyone's good faith. However, I am looking at this MOU, and first of all, despite what Superintendent Wells says that everyone understands it means, it is actually not tied to county standards. And that is a problem because we have teachers making health decisions when we have health professionals who can make that. And the other point that I really wanted to make was about the cohorts. My child, who can likely never get vaccinated because she has allergies, can be in 2 cohorts, but teachers who can be vaccinated are only required to have 1. That needs to change immediately.
Thank you. Sarah. We're not hearing you, Sarah. It doesn't look like you're muted, but. Try now.
Maybe we should come back.
Yeah. I think we lost her. If we could restart. Layla.
Hi, this is Layla Knox. I'm an Albany resident of 18 years, the parent of 3 children, one of whom is at Albany Middle School. There's just so much wrong with this MOU and the process by which we got here. This rushed, sloppy end result is the precise reason why the state legislature built a sunshine provision into the Educational Employment Relations Act. Compliance with Government Code 3547 is not optional. The district's past practice of not releasing proposals or MOUs does not preempt a very clear state law that requires the proposals be released and that the public have the opportunity to review and comment on them prior to negotiating behind closed doors. I'm asking that the board direct the superintendent from this point forward to comply with the EERA sunshine provision and with all other government transparency laws such as the Public Records Act and the Brown Act. As a public school district that is funded by taxpayer dollars, there is no excuse for circumventing the public's right to know and participate. Thank you.
Thank you. Shannon Huppeker.
Hi, thank you. I'm a parent of 2 AUSD students, and I know you've heard a lot of commentary about the problems with the MOU released yesterday. I share these concerns. I'm particularly distressed to find false language stating state and county guidelines as the reason behind the mandatory 6-foot distancing when state and county guidelines do not currently mandate 6-foot distancing, but 4-foot distancing instead. It is so critical that our language is accurate. However, today I want to focus on the process. There's a lot of talk from this administration about transparency and very little on display, and this is not a new problem. I watched for several years as school calendars were negotiated behind closed doors and brought to the board on the last possible day for approval. High school parents begged the board to change the calendar, but their hands were tied by the fact that the calendars were not presented until the last meeting in June. What changed? 2 years ago, board members united and required the calendar negotiation process change, and we were able to have an open and collaborative process. This school board has the right to demand more transparency in upcoming negotiations. Please do so.
Thank you. Samara.
Sorry, my name is Nicole. I'm a parent of a kindergartner named Samara at Marin School. Just to echo some things other people have said, I think we should revisit the quarantine language in the agreement. I think it disincentivizes people from self-reporting symptoms, which I think is very problematic and is not what we all want. I also think the MOU should be more flexible and vague, and reference county guidelines vaguely and say that the district will adhere to all county and state guidelines instead of putting forth specifics that aren't accurate, and we won't be able to pivot as those guidelines change. Thank you.
Thank you. Amy. You might be muted, Amy.
Yeah, hi,
There
this
you
is
go.
Amy Dahl. I'm the parent of a transitional kindergartner and a fourth grader. You as the board, your only job is to do what's best for students. It's taken a year for you to reach this flawed MOU. At least it's a baby step in the right direction. Please approve it, as our children are suffering and you, the board, have failed them by keeping them out of school for so long. Per state law, this MOU should have been posted long ago. It's our right to see the MOUs and to have the opportunity to read them. This MOU is flawed. It's false. It's got false statistics, false county guidelines. We were not able to, point these errors out. We had no time to do it. You're required by law to post the MOUs. I don't want to be asked not to speak at these meetings if I've emailed you. I am not a lobbyist. I am a parent. The thing that's best about Albany is our public schools, and please step up. Thank you.
Thank you. Maria.
Hi, my name is Maria Wilson, and I'm a parent of a Marin first grader. And last night I attended the Marin Welcome Back program. And my big concern about this MOU is really what other parents have said about quarantining, and the fact that last night, frankly, the administration misrepresented the conditions of reopening. What is in the MOU is totally different from what the administration said. They said it was based on public health guidelines. It is not. Section 21C, Romanet I, and it provides for a shutdown of a classroom for 14 days for practically any reason. Symptoms are not defined in the MOU. So who knows what these symptoms are? So there's nothing preventing children or teachers or the ATA from checking a box and shutting down this whole program. This is an abomination. You should reject it and modify that language. Thank you.
Thank you. Shailaja.
Hi, thank you. I am a physician and a parent of a second grader at Marin. Thank you, board and Superintendent Wells, for your time and effort spent on reopening schools. I would like to urge you to sign off on the current MOU to get our kids in school as a first step as soon as possible. However, I would like to urge you to urgently get started on the next steps required to have schools open for longer hours and ultimately full reopening. Particularly, I would like to point out that the current MOU's points specifically related to 6-foot distancing and the need to close cohorts for symptoms are not based on public health standards. This is a pandemic, and guidelines and scientific guidance are being updated at an unprecedented rate, and we must be dynamic and continue to follow the best evidence and current county and state guidelines. Thank you.
Thank you. Krista.
Hello, my name is Krista Bell. I'm the parent of a 6th grader and a kindergartner. I'm incredibly frustrated that the district failed to release these proposals prior to negotiations as apparently required by state law, and to allow the public reasonable time to comment and participate in this process. This lack of transparency and opportunity for participation does nothing to make parents and community members feel that their voices are being heard or that their perspectives are considered on this most important issue that is directly impacting our children and our families. That said, I hope the board will approve this MOU in order to move expeditiously toward reopening and begin taking immediate steps to be more transparent in the future and to move quickly toward a full reopening. The science supports it, the teachers are being vaccinated, and our children are suffering. Thank you.
Thank you. Emily.
Hello, I am Emily Sarwitz. I'm proud to be a teacher at the high school. I've been there for many years. I'm also a parent of 4 children in the high school. First, as a teacher, I just want to say that I feel heartbroken about what I'm hearing today. I don't know what other word to use. I feel heartbroken to hear this meeting unfold and to continue to be the brunt of a barrage of criticism, misguided, born of frustration and desperation from parents in the community. But I want to speak as a parent, and I'd like the Board of Ed to hear me as a parent. I have 4 kids, 2 at Cornell and TK, 2 at Marin in 3rd and 5th grade. I chose to send all of my kids back to in-person based on the hybrid schedule. I chose to send them back based on the schedule that the board approved. I chose to send them back based on this binding survey that the district asked us to complete. And I'm excited to send them back. And I want to say that I know not all board members were on the board in prior times. Thank you for letting me go real quick. But the district, many times, Dr. Wells proposed reopening dates and the board said, we don't like those dates. And they made up their own dates and pushed them sooner, and those dates couldn't be met. I would ask you not to make parents promises that can't be met in the 10 weeks that remain in the school year, and let us move forward in a positive way in the right direction to focus on a full and robust, safe reopening in the fall. I would also like to correct the record that someone said teachers only have 1 cohort. That's not true. Teachers have 2. I was at the Marin meeting last night. I absolutely did not hear our administration at Marin or anyone involved misrepresent the MOU. Please ratify this MOU and let us continue to work together collaboratively. Thank you.
Thank you. Jay Rosenberg.
Hi, this is Erin Rosenberg. I'm a parent of a 2nd grader at Marin Elementary School. My son has not been inside a classroom for a year, and I see the learning loss and frustration with Zoom school every day, and it is crushing. I congratulate you on tentatively reaching an agreement for reopening. It's an important first step. And although it is deficient in many ways, it is a start to getting kids back into the classrooms where they belong, and I urge you to approve it. I'm speaking today to remind you, you must keep your foot on the gas pedal and work immediately to add more in-person instruction. You may have seen the Washington Post article referring to the middle school plan in our tiny district as an example of a terribly inadequate hybrid plan due to its paltry hours of in-person instruction. We can do better. In fact, you have a legal obligation under state law, Education Code 43504, to offer in-person instruction to the greatest extent possible. You must do so, even if it means ultimately resuming the remote learning hours. We must work harder. Our children deserve this.
Thank you. Hannah.
Hello, my name is Hannah Seidner, and I'm a junior at Albany High School. Thank you, board and superintendent. Today, I would like to urge you guys to make the academy time optional for students because it's basically like our advisory time. There's no in-person learning, which is what most students wished for. It is just extra time, and it's unfair to students who have outside obligations to school. Again, thank you for everything that you have done, but please make this optional.
Thank you. JC.
Hi, this is Julia. Thank you to the ATA and the board for the time and superintendent for all the time and effort you've taken to reach this point in the negotiations. I just want to urge the board to try to tie this MOU to county guidelines. And I feel like, Dr. Wells talked a lot about how he'd refer to county practices, but if we can just tie it to the guidelines, I think it resolves a lot of issues, and also to approve the MOU. I also urge the board to direct the district to update the AUSD reopening plan so that it also reflects current guidelines. So, and I just want to make the point, this 6-foot distance is a problem, especially as it's explicitly written out in the MOU, because many districts already are requiring only 4 feet of distance between students. So for example, Orinda, San Ramon Valley, San Rafael, Palo Alto, all actually have 4 feet of spacing between student desks when 6 feet cannot be accommodated right within their COVID safety plan. I can provide that all to you later, but and they also reference county and CDC guidelines. So there are other model districts that are using 4 feet as a guideline, and we should do so also. So please vote to approve the MOU and tie the restrictions to county guidelines. Thank you.
Thank you. Carol.
Thank you. I won't add to what other, I'm Carol Camlin. I'm a professor at UCSF and parent of a 12th grader. Thank you all for your service. And I won't add to, but will say that I agree with what other public health professionals in our community have said about how the current MOU doesn't reflect the current science of COVID. But just make a brief point about ethics and just remember as we move forward that, you know, the value that everyone in good faith approached the MOU with was to keep students as safe as possible. And when we think about safety of both staffs and the teachers, but when we think about the safety of students, we have to consider that it's also the case that keeping them out of school might actively contribute to their harm. And it's wonderful that so many kids have coped with remote learning, but many, many others are still suffering mentally and emotionally from the continuing isolation and lack of routine. So I am really excited to hear that you're looking forward to rethinking our hybrid plan.
Thank you. Mark.
Hi, my name is Mark Wilson. My daughter is Addie at Marin. She's a first grader. I'm also a union attorney and a union side labor negotiator. So what I'm about to say, I hope carries weight. Break them. All you guys need to do to get our kids back to class is impose. They will take you to PERB for an unfair labor practice, but I guarantee you, if you listen to all the parents on this call, no one in the city of Albany is going to fault you guys for getting an unfair labor practice imposed on PERB. They have very little they can do. It's a small fine. All the parents will pay for it. To Duran and Doss and everybody who's been fighting for us, thank you. We have your back. Just impose and open up the schools.
We have one more commenter. I do want to remind folks that we take one comment per person. So if you're waiting to speak a second time, please know you can have another opportunity at another meeting. Yolanka. Yolanka, I'm promoting you because it says you have an older Zoom version.
Oh, I've never been promoted.
Are you there?
Before. Yeah, sorry. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't know. I don't know. My name is this week, my first grade daughter logged into her class with her fantastic teacher, and they did, as they always do, the question of the day. The question was, would you rather give up treats or TV? My daughter thought about this for a few seconds, then raised her hand and then said TV, because then I wouldn't have to do any more Zoom. This is what we are teaching our kids, to hate school. Today, I'd like to comment on this MOU and our next steps. I think there's universal agreement that we are voting on a crummy hybrid plan. In fact, this week, the Washington Post held up our plan, tiny little Albany, as an example of a quote, paltry plan. They are correct. Our plan is crummy, paltry, and has the fewest hours of any of our neighbors. We must approve this MOU and then immediately do two things. One, we must start back ASAP to add more hours to this plan. We must not take any breaks or pat ourselves on the back. We must not be the national, international example of a crummy, paltry plan. Number two, we must stop substituting our fears and intuition for the agreed upon science. This is like climate change. The overwhelming consensus is that schools can open safely with 4-foot distances, with or without vaccines, for expanded days now. Neither the AUSD nor the ATA are epidemiologists, pediatricians, or scientists. We must amend our MOU and our plans to follow the science and stop trafficking in unscientific fear. Thank you.
Thank you. I do just want to make a general comment before we come back to the board, which is to encourage folks to remember that this has been a year of trauma for everybody, different kind of trauma for every person. We have a lot of people who are parents, we have a lot of people who are teachers, we have a lot of people who are both, and I think it's very easy to see this as two opposing sides when it's really a collection of thousands of people, thousands of students, families, teachers, staff, who are trying to balance a lot of needs. And, you know, when we talk about the union, I think it's important to remember that these are our children's teachers. These are mothers and fathers and spouses and community members, and the same way that we want to talk about all families and students with equal grace and understanding. I just want to sort of put that out there before we come back, because I think it's helpful for us to remember that we're all talking about human beings here. So I think Trustee Davidson, your hand was up first.
Okay, I just want to follow up my comment on the public comment and just let everyone know that before this meeting, I expressed my dismay that we began our meeting over half an hour late for the public, and that I think as a board, we need to do a better job. We've been running late to our start times, and I don't want to do that to the parents who are carving out time in your days to listen. And I know I was there, and the board and the staff who are carving out time in their days so that we can move this all forward. My intention there was more of a, we need to hear from voices who really need to be heard from, and we are trying to hear from everybody right now, not that we don't want to hear from anybody. And also that we as a board and district need to do a better job of our own time management and getting things realistically set so that we as board members can give this the time that it deserves, because I didn't know today that we were going to be in an almost 3-hour meeting. And I have other things scheduled that I just canceled, and I know the rest of our board does. And I'm not saying that my schedule is more important than reopening schools. I'm just saying I want to be here and be present without having to have those other things in the background. I want to plan accordingly. So I'm sorry that my comment may have been taken the wrong way. That is not the intention. The intention was to do my best job here and to have us do our best job. Now I'm going to follow that up with something else here. I feel like as a board member that I did not see some of these things before just a little bit ago in our MOU. And some of them we discussed, and some of them I am a little bit surprised myself that that they're in here, because it wasn't really things that were completely brought to me as a board member. And it may be because I missed some of the process early on. But I feel like we've ended up in a place where most people aren't 100% happy, and we got somewhere, but it's not a great place. And I feel as a board member, like I didn't get the transparency that I should have. And I feel like, I'm going to just say, Trustee Duran, if you were okay with this, that we kind of had a discussion about this a little bit, that there were pieces missing. And I just really hope that moving forward, that's not the case, because the community is trusting us as board members to make educated decisions and approve things. And I can't do that right now because I don't feel like I had enough time to thoroughly consider this. I don't feel like I had enough time to hear all the feedback. I feel like also I pushed and we said we want that MOU and we want the proposals released, and we asked if they were released, and then they weren't. And so I feel like as a board member, I'm being completely ineffective. And this is really getting to a point, where it's a hard job. It's a hard time, and we want to do our best job. But I'm not sure that as of right this minute today, I feel like I 100% agree with how this has happened and how we're kind of being pushed to move it forward. If we don't vote today, we go back to the drawing board. That's going to delay the process. So I feel like we have to vote today so that we can get kids in school but I don't feel like I support where we're at. So I'm just going to put that out there. I know it's a long-winded thing, and I hope we can have some deliberations and come to a good place.
I don't want to lose sight of both of those items, the transparency concerns, and maybe that's something that Superintendent Wells can talk about after we've taken the other comments. And then also, we'll have some time at the end to discuss, we have to take action one way or the other, but also to provide direction. I think I'm getting the sense from the board that there is a lot of direction that we'd like to provide in terms of next steps. But I do want to hold on to that transparency question and come back to it. But I'll start with Trustee Boyd.
Thank you, President Hinckley. A few things. Firstly, I just wanted to say, and perhaps I feel this more acutely as an attorney myself, I would appreciate if we could have some, and I don't want to run afoul of what we talk about in closed session and what is appropriate for the open session. So I will just say if there could be a potential for some sort of a public workshop, or to make it an agenda item to discuss what the law is around making proposals available and at what time. I will say that although I am a lawyer, this is not my specialty. I would not begin to opine on these rules, but I certainly, and again, perhaps feel the need to say this more clearly because I am a lawyer, have no intention whatsoever of defying or going against what our legal obligations are. So however we can do that in a very transparent way so that the community is informed, so that the board is informed, I would very much like for that to happen. Also, I would agree with Trustee Davidson and say, and not to have this sound as if it is accusatory, but I do think that there were items where I felt as a board member that were not highlighted or made available to us until recently. So I think that that should not be what's happening, and that we should be very clear going forward to make sure that whether it's making the full plans available to the board as opposed to just highlighting items, sort of on a shared screen as it's sort of zooming by us, that it's important to make sure that that process is different in the future. And as far as just position, personally, I will say that I hear the parents and families and agree personally as well that this is my personal position that I support approving this plan so that it allows for students and teachers to be back in the classroom without further delay, but also that I would very much support and hope and believe that the board will be making a directive to Superintendent Wells that this be a first step and that negotiations continue with deliberate haste to adhere to increased hybrid hours if we reach that decision as a board. And I note that the hybrid plan is on the agenda for the upcoming meeting on Tuesday, to hopefully align with state and county guidelines as opposed to there being a conflict between those two things, and to recognize, as Dr. Wells noted before, that certain items that perhaps were holdovers from several months ago, that the climate has changed greatly, and so that those items should be revisited as well. And sorry, but the last thing is just, I think it might be helpful for Dr. Wells perhaps to sort of revisit the, and be as specific as possible about what happens at the point when a symptom is reported, so that it will hopefully, I think, reassure the community that we're not talking about a child coughs and the parent tells the school that their child coughed, and then immediately, with no sort of discretion from anybody else, a classroom is closed for 14 days. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice President Doss. We're not hearing you. If
oh, sorry.
There you go.
Talking and stuff. I have some proposed instruction that I would like to visit after we vote. So I'm going to save that for after we vote. I just wanted to say really quickly, because I thought it was important to mention while we're here, two things. One, both my kids are doing their homework right now. And so there's a lot of people using the internet. So that's so I turned my screen off so that I can save some of the bandwidth. So I apologize for that. But I think this is a pretty good picture of me. So so I just wanted to let people know that that's why I'm doing that. But when I give my proposed instruction, I will turn the screen on. Secondly, I wanted to ask if I just feel the need, and I hope he's here. I know he usually listens to the meetings. Mr. Kaysen, if you're out there, if you could, so, you know, he always has a way of kind of just giving like some positive, you know, inspirational comments, you know, in tough times. And so, Mr. Kaysen, if you're out there, if you could just kind of jump on for a couple of minutes and give us a little boost. I sure would appreciate it if you're out there. I hate to put you on the spot, but you're really good at it. Thank you.
Maybe we'll give, well, you did put him on the spot, but maybe we'll give him a minute to
Absolutely.
Raise his hand if he wants to speak.
All right.
So I'm going to I would also love to hear from him. Trustee Duran.
About three things I'd like to say. The first is about the transparency, and I know you're going to delve into it further, President Hinckley, but I really want to say that transparency is a mantra of the superintendent. And I think we really need to be sure that it is based on reality, and because I really feel that parents in general, what we've been hearing lately has been that they do not believe we've been transparent, that the district has not been transparent, and lots of examples have been given. And I think it behooves us. I mean, not only does it behoove us to do it in terms of really as an educational institution and the kind of working together that we should be doing ongoing with our parents, but also for legal reasons. And I, going forward, all the sunshine requirements, I, as one board member, feel very strongly about that we need to follow the legal compliance. And once again, President Hinckley, maybe you will speak further to that. The second thing is that Tuesday night presentation. I think once again, it's important that we reaffirm for parents on Tuesday night that for those who need to maintain a strong remote instructional program, that will always be there for them. You know, because as we've heard very much from the parents that so need their kids to go back to school, there's been some hesitation or now what about what's going to happen with us? And I just think we need to let parents know that we're talking about all kids, and part of that is the kids that need to have to stay home, etc., and that we will never forget that aspect. So when we start talking about the hybrid models, we should reassure the full community that the remote is continuing in a strong basis. On the other hand, in terms of what we're hearing from the community, obviously, is that we need expanded time in our hybrid model. And I would want to say no more baby steps. I mean, I think that is what we've started with, and it's time to move beyond those baby steps. It's for the sake of our children. I don't even want to use the word bold, because I don't think we do that here in the district, but I would want us to move forward, and I would like to see on Tuesday night, Superintendent, you providing many options or multiple options of what is possible in terms of extended time. Be creative and you know, give us what you think is possible for the kids. And of course, we'll respond to those. And the last thing I'd like to say is that my my heart says one thing, but my head says something else. My heart says to reject this MOU. And I sort of gave my reasons privately. But in terms of listening to the overwhelming majority of the parents and who really feel even this baby step is key for their children. And I certainly don't want to cause more harm to our children. So I will be voting for supporting the MOU going forward. And also in the spirit that, and we've heard a little bit of it reflected today, that at the end of all this, we want to be a united community. Albany is very small, and we live and we work together here. And you know, I think in the moment we say things that we don't really mean, or we're not maybe saying everything that needs to be said to reassure people. It's not one viewpoint against another viewpoint. It's about how do we manage all of it so everybody feels, first of all, that they're heard, and second of all, that we are trying to resolve all the steps for the sake of our kids. And of course we have different interpretations, but ultimately I think we do want to keep that in mind going forward, that this is you know, this is a community effort and we all need to work together.
Thank you. Student board member Mala.
Thank you. I just wanted to share, because we don't get to hear from students extensively, that students are really excited to go back, and just being able to choose the option, at least at the high school this past week, there was a lot of talk of just excitement of being able to go back and seeing peers and being in different cohorts and being in a choir cohort, or, you know, whatsoever. But I think also students really appreciate all the work that has gone into this. Obviously there are different concerns and like with safety and health guidelines that students have, but in general, I think there's a lot of appreciation and excitement, and I just wanted to share that. And I know that moving forward, I'm going to vote to approve this plan, but despite like future plans moving forward after this meeting, I just wanted to share that students are ready to go back and appreciate all the work that has gone into this.
Great, thank you. All right, so I want to summarize where we're at, and we do need to act on our review and action item. So I'll start with the transparency piece. So I did ask, the board has heard some legal advice on this. I asked the superintendent to get us sort of written up legal opinion that shows that we are in fact in compliance with education code, that we have not violated the intent of the Sunshining Law. So I think that's an important statement to make and be able to share publicly. I think that's a different question from transparency in a bigger way, both the transparency that board members have expressed not feeling and the transparency that the public has expressed wanting to see more of. So I do think, you know, as a legal matter, it's important for us to be clear that we're in compliance with education code. I think it's very important for us to get a legal statement that confirms that, not just orally, but in writing for our community, because it is a big allegation to say that a board is in violation of the law. But I also want to honor that we have been asking for as much transparency as we can have about the kinds of decisions that are being made. So one, I guess, first, I'd like to say I'm hearing the board and the public want that, and I want to make sure that that message is being heard by us and by the superintendent going forward. Transparency is an easy word to throw around. It's a very hard word to act on. And I think we've all, those of us who've been here a couple of years, have been on both ends of that. So I think one opportunity to take some real action on this on Tuesday is to have as much of a public discussion as we can have about what the next step process is going to look like, what it's going to look like for us to begin negotiating, adding more hours and so forth. I think the more the public understands about how negotiations work, the better off we all are. And I think the board has expressed a clear desire on this and other matters to get more information earlier about the whole content of an MOU. So I think we've heard that, and I think the superintendent is hearing that. On the quarantining process, I think it's important, and I assume that directions are going to be going out through sites and to students and families, clarifying the process for symptoms and other things. I do think it's very important that we get clear messaging about what this actually means and what the practice is going to be, how the superintendent will make choices about closing cohorts and reopening them. I think needs to be made clear to allay some of that anxiety. So for next steps, I think what I'm hearing from, I think at least a majority of the board, if not everybody, is an intent to approve this MOU, and obviously we need a motion and a vote on it, but then to move very quickly with conversations and information and action and proposals for increasing the number of in-person hours, and doing that with all of the information that we need about how that impacts the need to bargain, how that impacts students who choose to stay remote, how that impacts other goals we might have. But I think we've provided both the sense of urgency for continuing to update our policies and our schedules to reflect the state of public health as it goes forward. And that includes case rates, that includes vaccinations, and that includes state and county guidance as it evolves. So the first step of that is for us to have a very detailed and fact-based discussion on Tuesday about options, so that the next step after that would be to see real schedules. And I also want to express appreciation for the families that have helped us gather some data on what other districts are offering so that we understand some of these different models. So what I'd like to do is have us take action on the MOU, and then we can have a final round of comments providing direction to the superintendent if people feel like there's more needed on that. But I think I've captured our discussion. We have a lot of discussion on Tuesday about this, but I am looking for a motion on the action item.
I move that we approve the MOU presented to the board.
I'll second.
Okay. Student trustee Corzo Clark. I think he had to leave for a class, so he may be gone. Student trustee Mala.
Yes.
Trustee Duran.
Yes.
Vice President Doss.
Yes.
President Hinckley.
Yes.
Trustee Boyd.
Yes.
Trustee Davidson.
Yes.
So the motion to approve the MOU passes unanimously with one student board member in class abstaining for class attendance. I have to say I'm very excited about this step. People see it as either a large or a baby step, but either way it's a step. And I know we're all excited to see kids back on campus. So board, let me hear if there's additional direction, and this could include specific direction or questions for Tuesday's meeting as well, because I think that obviously is our most immediate opportunity. And I'm happy to make notes of items that you want to make sure get included in that presentation or questions you want answered in advance. Vice President Doss.
I would like to, this is my instruction here. I took some notes, make it easier. I'd like to see the superintendent bring back at least 2 options that increase the in-person hybrid hours while continuing to offer remote options with a target date of starting that increased time directly after spring break. And so just to kind of additionally, so just kind of recap what my thought process is. Bringing back the plan bringing back the plans at the March 23rd meeting for review and discussion, and then having the emergency meeting to vote on the 29th, because we already have a meeting on the 30th, but it's separate from this, just to be clear there. And so that gives us almost 3 weeks for our approval time. And I think that we can work within those and get that implemented. And then that puts us on track for right after spring break. And then I think that it will put us on a clear path towards the fall.
Trustee Duran.
I just wanted to see if maybe we could push, maybe not possible, but I would like to see some options come Tuesday. Otherwise we're kind of spinning our wheels about Tuesday night, because we kind of already know what's in what the hybrids are going to happen come March 15th. So to the extent that the superintendent is able to get the wheels going for some more innovative ideas or different ideas, March 23rd sounds so far away, and I would like to see us at least have ideas presented to us so that we can move quicker, because the turnaround time may take a lot longer than we expect, especially if this has to go up to negotiations, which that wasn't my understanding, but just in case, it's going to take us some time maybe.
Yeah. All right, I got your hand. Other board members? Yeah, Trustee Boyd.
Thank you. I'm not sure if this would already be a part of a hybrid discussion anyway, but just in case it isn't automatically, I would just say I would want to have an in-depth discussion of the potential for teachers to teach to in-person and remote students simultaneously, what is required as far as the technology, any necessary training for webcams, et cetera. As much detail on that as possible as one potential route to increase the in-person hours.
I apologize, President Hinckley, but if I could just throw in to the superintendent that we have gotten so many plans, hybrid plans that have come in from parents from different districts, that would at least be a beginning place to start.
Vice President Doss. I don't know if this is your hand from before.
No, new hand. So I think I wanted to, I agree with Trustee Duran, but I wanted to be clear about her request so that I can make sure that I'm supporting it the right way. Are you requesting to see plans for items that can be changed without negotiating, or items that can be changed that require negotiating?
You tell me. I'm so confused about what we have to negotiate and what we don't. I thought it was clear at one point, but it seems it's totally different. So I'm sorry, Vice President Das, I'm not in a position to tell you about what needs negotiation and what doesn't at this moment.
So what I would propose, all of the same language that I mentioned in my previous direction, and just to kind of add on to that, based off of what Trustee Duran said, to have maybe some preliminary plans submitted on Tuesday with ideas of changes that we can make that don't require negotiation.
So, sorry.
No,
I mean, interrupt you.
Go ahead.
So maybe what we can ask now for Superintendent Wells is, are you clear about what kind of presentation and discussion to be prepared for on Tuesday? Because what I'm hearing is that we want to hear some of the things that we've asked for before, including some parameters for what the contingencies might be for the fall, a description of what kinds of items need to be negotiated versus what kinds of items don't. And then also some detailed explanation of different options and parameters for what it would take to increase in-person hours, including things like the factors that drove the choices of these models in the first place. You know, how do we balance the need for in-person and remote? How do we decide whether we do strategies like simulcasting, which some districts have done? How do we decide how we structure the day for kids who have multiple teachers? I think that all of that is part of what you'll be prepared to talk about on Tuesday. I think some board members are also wanting to hear specific models. Do you feel like you have direction from the board on what kinds of things we're going to want to talk about on Tuesday, or do you need more direction?
I think it's clear to us. I just need it to be clear to the board. What I think I'm hearing is that doing these things independent of our labor partners is a possibility. And our preference is to work with our labor partners. I don't think the board is saying do this independent of our labor partners, but it sounds like some of it may be alluding to that. But I just wanted the board to be clear on that. So we would come back with some scenarios and some possibilities, but I caution us that we will have these discussions with our labor partners in terms of how best to do them. I don't want to exclude them or it to perceive that we are intentionally excluding them. Secondly, I do want to respond to a comment that I found deeply disturbing. As superintendent, I'm not remotely interested in breaking anyone or any spirit. I'm mostly interested in making sure we work together, collaborative as a team. We are going through some very difficult times. Everybody's feeling the pressure. And I think that moving forward in the name of transparency, the way we do negotiations and MOUs is the same way we've been doing them the last 30 or 40 years. Although we have a legal opinion saying that we don't have to sunshine the MOU, it's crystal clear moving forward, independent of our legal opinion, that the board and the community wants to see the proposal. And I suggest we do that moving forward because it's nothing that precludes us from doing that. Actually, it's legal to do that. And so I'm hearing what the board's saying. I just want to make sure that our labor partners know that we do plan to include them in these kinds of discussions and to get their input, and that we need to move expeditiously if we want to have more in-person time. And we have done a lot of studies. This won't be any first step for us in terms of what kind of models are out there. I just spent time in Santa Clara Unified School District addressing and researching a model that they adopted that Trustee Boyd just referenced. So we have a model, a current model that I think might be pleasing to the board, but we would talk about that Tuesday night. And so thank you for the question, Madam Chair.
Great. I'll also just remind the board that we have the opportunity to add additional questions when we ask questions about the agenda, so that if there are other things that you think you want to ask in public in the meeting, you can give staff a heads up so they're prepared to provide that information. So superintendent's clear. We have an agenda for Tuesday. I'm sure it'll be a long and rich discussion. Vice President Doss, did you have a last word?
I think that the instructions sounded pretty clear, but I didn't hear any mention of the specific dates of when we like to see the information, and that I referenced in my original instruction. And so I just want to make sure that that's included.
Right. So we do right now have, I mean, we have this item as a report on the 9th, and we have, I'll double check the agenda, but I think we already have this as an action item on the 23rd.
Okay. And then,
yeah.
And then what about the special meeting I mentioned
I think I'd like to hear from the superintendent on Tuesday about what a possible timeline is before we start scheduling other dates. I think he's hearing the urgency that we have. I just want to be mindful of a statement that somebody made earlier about, you know, scheduling dates out when we don't yet have something in front of us, and we do need to be working with our labor partners. You know, but we can certainly direct a series of next steps on Tuesday after we've had a longer time to discuss this. Trustee Davidson. Yeah.
Thank you. Just to follow up on what Trustee or Vice President Doss said, I think what I'm hearing is that he doesn't just want to put arbitrary dates out. This goes back to kind of us saying, if we're going to negotiate again, we keep it to, you know, a set time period, so it's not just going on endlessly. I think that's what he's getting at, not just us throwing dates out. And please correct me, Vice President Doss, if I'm incorrect here, but that we're just trying to keep these things really moving. And I'm not sure, as having an action item on something that we haven't discussed before maybe needs clarity of him adding these details in.
Got it. I mean, maybe one instruction that would be helpful is for the superintendent to also schedule negotiation dates and bring those and talk about those with the board on Tuesday, so that we can have a better sense of what we need to do to make the timeline work quickly.
Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. I don't think that I'm not saying, like, setting the date saying that we shouldn't work with everybody involved and be collaborative and work together. I'm just saying that I'd like to see specific dates in mind, so that the working together and the collaboration has, you know, you have like those targets where everybody involved knows, like, that these are the goals that we have in place, and this is the time frame, and kind of this is where we're going. I think that it will help all parties involved. I think that our partners will have an understanding of kind of where we are and what's happening, and I think that the community will understand that this is the direction that we're moving in. This is the time frame. I think it just helps to kind of get more clarity and for everybody to kind of understand, you know, what's happening, instead of just not having like the exact dates, and then people have to kind of wonder what's going to happen, and then you get 30 emails of everybody saying, hey, hurry up, because we haven't given them a time as to what to look forward to, or which meeting they should come and speak at, and what they should have prepared for those specific meetings and things of that nature. So I am in no way saying let's not work together and be collaborative. I like exact dates.
And you're talking about meeting dates or dates that we would be having a new model implemented?
I'm speaking in terms of so that we know, like, this meeting coming up, we know that these ideas will be coming for that meeting. So we know to expect those at that meeting, and so that
Okay, got
we know
it.
going
That-
forward.
yeah, that's what I thought. So that's what I meant when I said we have this as an action item on the 23rd.
Mhm.
Okay, I think we're all talking about the same thing. So Superintendent Wells, you're clear about preparing for Tuesday. Board on Tuesday, we'll have another opportunity to have a much more detailed discussion and then give some very clear next steps. And that, I think, is everything.
Can I just
An
say
hour,
one last?
an hour and a half later.
No.
Yes, go ahead.
One quick jump in. Since we've now kind of changed what we're looking for the Tuesday meeting, this seems like a big ask, but do you think that we could get some of the components a little bit in advance just so we can look over them even a couple of hours so we're not seeing things for the first time in the Tuesday board meeting? Or is that too much to ask?
Well, we're going to try. Today's Friday. We'll be working Friday night, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, and we're going to do our very best to get you what you can and what we have. We're even going to be working half the day on Tuesday at some of those items. I'm also going to ask that the board consider that it's only 1 hour, that we may have to clear some other items off of our agenda because it's not going to be a one-item event. It may turn into about 3 hours. And so I'm getting back to Trustee Davidson's point, being more realistic and anticipating that this is not going to be 1 hour item. It's going to be at least a 3 hour item. So wanted folks to be mentally prepared for that. And we may want to consider removing some items because this is the big item for that night.
All right, so another thing to think about as you read through the agenda. All right.
Thank you.
Well, we have an MOU. I'm very excited. We have kids coming back to school and we have a set of next steps. So thanks everyone for all your hard work. Thanks to the public for their comments, and this meeting is adjourned.